Stress may also be affecting the performance of Sarah in her netball games. It is likely that from the scenario that Sarah, similarly to Nick, also experiences distress, however only during the more important games. This may be due to the college's efforts to schedule these games at a time where they can attract many spectators, which is often a cause of stress, as they may feel obliged to try and produce a good performance, but unable to do so. This is not the case for Rachel, Sarah's teammate, who seems to thrive off the pressure, and therefore likely experiences eustress, which allows them to be more alert and aware of the game, but not become overwhelmed by the stress, leading her to thrive in the big games. This can be seen with performers like Ronaldo, who says he likes living with the pressure. This stress may be excelled from the position Sarah plays, as she is the goal shooter, which is a high pressure position that requires technique, whereas Rachel plays centre, which is just as important, however perhaps requires less technique and pressure. This would cause Sarah to become less focused. And concentrated during her high pressure shots, which is likely why her shot percentage falls so dramatically. Physically, her heart rate and blood pressure may also increase, causing her to perhaps become more anxious, which would be a somatic symptom. Another cause of stress may be due to Rachel, as Sarah is aware of the attitude she shows her and isn't supportive of Sarah in the game she performs poorly in, which may, as a result, give her more stress, further pushing her into a zone of distress. This could lead to cognitive effects, as Sarah may become less concentrated, causing her to make mistakes and become unable to make decisions, like when the right time is to shoot the ball. Anxiety is also likely to be a factor affecting Sarah's performances in the bigger games. In this case, it can be suggested that she has high levels of state anxiety, as opposed to trait anxiety, as in training and local games her scoring average is 86%, suggesting that it's not a personality disposition that is stable over time, as instead Sarah begins to feel anxious in the crunch games with bigger crowds, as she may perceive the situation as threatening, leading the scoring average to fall to 32%. The anxiety she feels can be tested and measured in questionnaires such as Martin's Sport Competitive Anxiety Test, which uses an athlete's statements from numerous questions to determine the level of anxiety they feel in a competitive situation. This uses 4 factors to determine the level of anxiety they will feel, such as the different types of anxiety they have experienced, the competition, and the specific anxiety trait related to competition. Finally, how an individual performs in different circumstances also affects anxiety and is therefore a factor in this test, as athletes have different optimal levels of anxiety that allow them to play better, which was said by Hahn in 2002 and tested by him, proving that some athletes can tolerate higher levels of anxiety before performance drops off. Anxiety can also be seen through physical changes, like sweat, especially in high pressure moments, and a raised heart rate, as these are symptoms the athlete may feel. Another measure of anxiety can be done through the competitive state anxiety inventory from Martins in 1990, who discovered an athlete's baseline levels of anxiety and compared it to the levels before a competition, which showed cognitive state anxiety can be seen at high levels a week before the game, whereas the somatic changes rose just before a game. In Sarah's case, this may mean that in the week leading up to the game, she may be worried and get nervous thoughts, however only begins to experience muscle tension and an increased heart rate just before a game. It's likely Sarah has very high levels of competitive anxiety due to Rachel's expectations and other factors. She sees the competition itself as threatening, as she may have a fear of evaluation before the game that is heightened during the game when she is criticised by Rachel, which are both factors that will affect her anxiety. As she sees it as threatening, her cognitive and somatic anxiety would rise, as she may become worried about the game, which could also cause her heart rate to rise, which she could perceive badly. Finally, levels of arousal are also likely to have an effect on Sarah's performance, as it is the state of alertness that prepares the body for exercise. Arousal is controlled by the RAS, which is a network of nerve cells and fibers that connects within the brain and spinal cords, stimulating and regulating the cerebral cortex to arouse it, preparing it for exercise. Introverts tend to have a higher level of arousal and therefore are more sensitive to RAS stimulation, which is why they seek less stimulation, and extroverts are the opposite. As stated before, there are a number of different theories that attempt to suggest the effects of arousal on sporting performance, and the inverted view theory works in this case. This theory suggests that the link between arousal and performance can be graphed in the shape of an inverted U, as can be seen in the PowerPoint. This suggests that at a low arousal, an athlete's performance is poor, as they can be easily distracted and are not energized for the game, meaning they have a wide attention field, perhaps focusing on unimportant cues like the crowd as opposed to the game. As arousal increases, the performance gradually increases until it reaches its optimal, where it gradually begins to decrease again as arousal further increases, leading back to a poor performance. Similarly to the catastrophe theory, this implies that there is an optimal level of arousal where an athlete can perform at their maximum level. It is likely that for introverts, this would be at a lower arousal to extroverts, whose optimal arousal may be higher, and therefore the graph would be shifted to the right. In addition to this, an experienced elite athlete may cope better with higher levels of arousal, as they have adapted to it, and therefore their graph would also be shifted to the right. In Rachel's case, it is likely she is working in her optimal level, as it can be suggested that she is playing well and is therefore concentrated, selectively attending the most important cues. Sarah, on the other hand, is likely over-aroused in these big games, causing her to perform poorly and become hypervigilant, meaning she is in a condition of nervousness and panic. In this state, she is likely to have a narrow attention field, meaning she focuses in too much on one cue, like the ball for example, causing her to lose the player she is marking perhaps. Although this theory seems to work in this scenario, it does not account for a disastrous drop in performance that would cause the player's performance to decrease rapidly, like a missed penalty in netball, at an important time, and also doesn't account for how anxiety may affect this, like in the catastrophe theory. The eyes-off theory could also be used in this case, as it is similar to the inverted U theory in the fact that there is an optimal level of arousal where performance is at its best, however believes that it is instead a bandwidth based on the athlete's individual characteristics. This was found by Hannon in 1986, whose research showed that some athletes perform better with low levels of anxiety and therefore lower arousal, and others perform better with high anxiety and therefore high arousal. This also suggests that instead of gradually becoming psyched up, the athlete is either in or out of the bandwidth at which they perform at their best. For example, in Sarah's case, as she is not an elite athlete who is experienced, she is likely to have a low eyes-off. However, as her position requires her to play precise shots, it is likely her optimal bandwidth would be in the middle with a moderate level of eyes-off, as can be seen with athlete B in the diagram. This theory also has criticisms, as it struggles to adapt to the different task type / situation. For example, Sarah in friendly games as opposed to the big games, and how her optimal level may change. As well as the RAS, arousal can also be increased due to both somatic and cognitive anxiety. It can be seen with the cognitive anxiety during the catastrophe theory, as it shows how high cognitive anxiety can cause the arousal to increase rapidly, leading to a bad performance that can be reformed if the arousal is able to lower again. Furthermore, the mix of both somatic and cognitive anxiety will increase arousal, as the body will become physically and psychologically alert and ready. Stress, anxiety, and arousal can all be reduced using somatic and cognitive techniques. For example, Sarah could try and use centering to regain her focus and concentration that she may have lost as a symptom of these two, as it would allow her to calm down using deep breathing to focus on the right cues and not what Rachel may be saying. She could also use imagery to form mental pictures of her performances during training and other local games where she performs well, as it could give her the feeling of playing well, giving her the confidence to believe she can meet the task she has set, therefore lowering her stress and anxiety and arousal.